Now, in every big office workplace, there is always one sneaky individual who tries to make himself look kind of all superior by disparaging and undermining his colleagues. Take, for example, the New South Wales Liberal Party. Who would that person be?
Well, my view is that this person should be disendorsed because I do not believe she's fit for office. I do not believe that she is aligned with the values of the Liberal Party.
It's New South Wales Treasurer Matt Kean, who apparently has so little to do in state politics he feels the need to publicly intervene in a federal pre-selection, all in the name of tolerance, of course. And his target is Liberal candidate for Warringah, Catherine Deeves, the co-founder of Save Women's Sport Australasia. She's so intolerant, she thinks women's sport should be restricted to, my God, biological women.
Oh, no, Rita, because, quote, there is no place in a mainstream political party for bigotry, Matt Kean tweeted last night. Quote, coming out as trans would be hugely challenging, especially for kids, and political leaders should be condemning the persecution of people based on their gender, not participating in it.
And the ABC loves nothing more than a woke Liberal railing against those cruel Conservatives in his party. Radio National breakfast host Patricia Karvelis did not even challenge this ridiculous claim of Kean's.
She invoked the Nazis to attack trans people, comparing one case to the grudge trials of the Third Reich. I mean, to compare this issue to one of the worst atrocities in human history is nothing short of appalling, absolutely disgraceful.
Now, it's true that some Jewish organisations were deeply offended by Catherine Deeves' comments, but some less so. Here on Outsiders, we are always quick and the first ever in the Australian media to condemn every time stupid or ignorant comparisons with the Holocaust. But I don't believe Deeves' comments fall into that category. The reference to the grudge trial was an analogy referring to one specific trial overseas involving a father who did not support a teenager transitioning. As for the other reference, here's what Deeves actually said in a discussion about gender affirmation. You can decide for yourself if it is offensive or not. She said, I've got 3 small children. I have skin in the game on their behalf, and people just weren't willing to speak up. And I just felt compelled to do so. She's talking about transitioning and gender affirmation. She goes on to say, I've always loved 20th century history. I think many people say, I'd never be one of the villagers that stayed quiet when the trains went past. I would have been part of the French resistance. But when all of this was happening and no one was speaking out, I thought, this is it. I don't think this is right, and it might come at a cost to me, but I have to say it.
That puts Catherine Deeves' analogy in a somewhat different light. And then there was this whopper.
She also said that half of all male trans people are sex offenders. I mean, that's just outright bigotry.
Well, Matt, again, you deliberately appear to have taken her comments out of context, and the ABC, surprise, surprise, let you get away with it. 2GB's Ben Fordham, however, did not.
When you talk about likening young trans people to sex offenders, I don't think she did that. Can you show me where she did that?
Well, I mean, the quote here, I'm reading it, half of all transgender men are sex offenders.
She was talking about transgender men, and she was talking about the prison population.
Well, it's not appropriate language.
You've just verbaled her by suggesting, Matt, you've just verbaled Catherine Deeves live on the air by saying twice now that she was comparing trans children to sex offenders. And then when you clarify the quote, you're talking about men, and she was talking about men in the male prison population.
ABC journalists take note. That is how to hold politicians to account. Ben Fordham, brilliantly, again.
Ben, I've got the quotes in front of me, but what I'm not going
No, we'll read it. Go on, read it.
Ben,
read the quote, Matt.
Comments. I'm not trying to silence her.
Read the quote, Matt. You just said you've got the quote in front of you. Read the quote. Everyone's listening. Read the quote.
Well, Ben, what I'm not going to do...
I'll read it for you, Matt Kean. Half of all males with trans identities as sex offenders compared with less than 20% for the rest of the male estate. Now, the male estate is what the UK refers to as their male prison population. And what she's talking about has been verified. It's a UK government study which showed half of trans male prisoners were sex offenders. So she correctly quoted that report. She said nothing about trans children being sex offenders. So what you've just said is a lie.
Ben, that's not correct.
Now, for once, be honest, Matt Kean. It's not Deeves you have an issue with. It's the people involved in her pre-selection. Even your own party despises you for your underhanded tactics.
Why are you undermining the Prime Minister, the Premier and the first female president of the Liberal Party who considered all of the candidates and backed Catherine Deeves?
Well, the last thing I'm doing is undermining the Prime Minister or the Premier.
Your colleagues are contacting me, Matt Kean, I've got to tell you, and I'll read one of the messages I've received. This is about white-anting Dominic Perrottet. Matt hates Scott Morrison so much he's scared he'll win. Our MPs are furious. Matt thinks if ScoMo and Dom fail, he can rebrand the Liberals.
This is a so-called liberal who indulges in renewables adventurism and climate change activism. He demands universal childcare at the expense of taxpayers, and he styles himself as a champion of gender equality by calling for mandatory female representation on boards.
I called out a number of private sector organisations like Tabcorp, like Boral, that have one female director out of in some cases 9 directors. So we want to lead the way. We want to set the example.
Oh, Matt, you set the example all right, as the Daily Telegraph revealed this week. Matt Kean ignored his own directive for companies to promote more women onto boards by replacing the female chair of Water New South Wales with a man.
Oh dear, and does Matt Kean think we've forgotten his own past when it comes to tolerance and respect for all?
Mr Kean's former girlfriend revealed he sent text messages to fellow State Liberal MP Rita Panahi asking for sex. In the exchange, Mr Kean told Ms Panahi he was tempted to drive to see her.
As Kean's former girlfriend Caitlin Keege wrote on social media in 2018, I was in Adelaide trusting my partner not to play up, but alas, here we are, another minister getting away with his predatory behaviour, unquote.
Give me Catherine Deeves any day of the week over Matt Kean.
Hear, hear.
He can try these holier-than-thou tactics all he wants, but there's the stench of hypocrisy about him, not to mention disloyalty to the Liberals.
Do not believe that she is aligned with the values of the Liberal Party.
If you want to campaign for the Labor Party, join the Labor Party.